welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and it's time for this year's airing of Grievances. For the uninitiated, the airing of Grievance is mostly a Seinfeld reference to honor Festivus, which is today, and is meant to be in good fun as a fan of the game. Most of the time. If you don't doubt my attachment to this game, I strongly encourage you to watch the last segment of our 10th anniversary celebration video. Now, I had previously hinted that this year's video would focus on a singular grievance, but I need to walk that back. As I started working on that video, which was projected to be over 30 minutes long on a singular topic, I started getting really mad. Genuinely mad and upset. And I think that many of you would have been too. That isn't helpful, and I think that the last few years have already been hard enough on Smash Up fans, so maybe some things are better left unsaid. It would not have been about IP factions, or screen cap art, or promo distribution problems, or that giant blue rectangle in the box, all of which could have been grievances. Like I said, it's been a hard year. There were people who were normally solid who let us down, but for some of these, maybe these people should be given the benefit of the doubt, which is why I've decided to forgive Kevin. Kevin Feige had a great track record, and Phase 4 was a rare misstep, and not nearly as bad as what some other Kevins have done this year, so I forgive him. And in the spirit of forgiveness and helpfulness, I decided to take a different approach, a reverse airing of grievances. This video largely focuses on the 10th anniversary, which I own, but I'm honestly not happy with it. My feelings are complex, but the words that I would use would be insincere and disingenuous. I wonder how you would describe it. It doesn't feel like a celebration of 10 years or something that was built towards. Sometimes it feels like someone woke up and realized 10 years was coming up and they needed something as soon as possible. It has pretty substantial access and quality concerns. As a community, I feel like we deserve better. So this video will focus on things that could be done to make things better by establishing a plan. This video is organized as a list of action items to stop current grievances or prevent future ones, things that I believe are very achievable. By focusing on action items, this video can be constructive and helpful, and hopefully it resonates with many of you. Not every grievance will resonate with every person, because priorities matter greatly among personalities, and I am also focusing on plausible things. For example, setting up a Kickstarter for international distribution of promo packs is something important to consider, but not as easy as some of these things are. So let's reverse air some grievances. First and foremost, publicly state the plan for the 10th anniversary factions and titans. Will they be sold standalone in the AEG store? Will they be repackaged in another format? How will they be made available? This has been a question on many minds, and its answer is really vital to the health of the system, as well as the retention of its audience. If the titans are truly about balance, then you just can't make them quasi-available. That would be basically saying, there's a problem, but not big enough to solve conclusively. It's only a problem based on your budget and physical address. If there is a plan, say what it is. If there's no plan, say that. In my experience, the truth is rarely worse than what people conjure in its absence, and transparency helps mitigate the sting of bad news. To make an analogy, when something goes wrong at work, where I'm a manager, my stakeholders are going to find out eventually. I can either tell them myself and control the narrative, or I can pretend like nothing is wrong and hope that they don't find out, which they will. I never opt for the second approach because it never works. So say what the plan is. If you don't know what it is yet, say that you're figuring it out, but hear the concerns of the people. Radio silence is only making things worse for an agitated community. As far as I can tell, the 10th anniversary is still widely available, which speaks a lot to the community refusing to buy it, souring the 10th anniversary experience. I don't believe that announcing the plan would hurt sales, because it's been 2 months. FOMO would have kicked in by now, so say what the plan is. The second is much like the first. Announce the plan for the 100th faction. I would argue that this is a potentially bigger milestone than the 10th anniversary, and this should really feel like a celebration of the game. It would also answer questions as to whether or not Munchkin and Disney and Marvel are considered canon, and announcing where to receive it would alleviate concerns over its availability, like if they did another promo or limited release. This is a chance to do a big milestone right. The next action item ties directly into what people thought would be in the 10th set. Print physical errata. Even if people have to pay for it, make it available. Do a pre-order if you have to. Players can live without it, because we have, yet we still want it. This is especially important as we get further and further away from a comprehensive rulebook that risks becoming outdated. Other companies have figured this out, so Smash Up can too. No one seemed to be confused when they printed bases with larger fonts. Anyone who would be acquiring these cards would know what to do with them, so I don't see why this is such a problem, and it's something that really bothers a lot of people, so just make it right. My fourth action item is a prerequisite for the ones that follow, and it's not something that most would be aware of, but the action is simple. Acknowledge that expansions are expansions. Smash Up treats all of its expansions as standalone two-player games that can be incorporated into the main system or played without it. This is absurd. I can't imagine anyone buying Culture Shock as their first foray into Smash Up. Even if someone did, this would be the extreme minority of cases. There are two main problems with this. First, there is no versioning of the rulebook, so players have no idea which one is current in terms of what rules are correct. Think about During Gate. If you bought the 2 World Tour expansions, how would you know what During means? So they immediately go to the second issue. How do they know what to buy? They ask. They ask us all the time. Not just me, the entire community. Given the size of the system, they rely on the community to know what to purchase, and the answer is never the latest as your first purchase. And if they're asking about getting into Smash Up, it's because they played the core set. The next grouping of action items are thematically all linked. So I'll start with the main one, which I believe to be easier than you think. Turn the rulebook into a living document. To my knowledge, this is what Marvel Champions does, because their system evolves and they have a core rulebook. Each Smash Up rulebook feels like it was recreated from scratch. There are a lot of crucial details in the BCR that have not been included in International Incident or Culture Shock, and not even standalone sets like Disney contain everything you need. Because of the size and scope of the rulebook compared to the expansion boxes, it's impossible to fit them into the expansion box size, even if you cut the fluff. So stop trying. If you acknowledge the expansions are expansions, then you can contain minimal information that references the change in rules while pointing back to an online version of the rulebook. It would also solve the issue that once written, mistakes are seemingly canonized because there is never an opportunity to go back and fix them. Anecdotally, we know that the flock clarification is wrong, as is the Dwarf Treasure King rule, but it would be so much easier to just update the text. This is something where volunteers could help, as here is an updated rule clarification that took me all of 5 minutes. This is needed to be done with the Disney rulebook for the discard rule being wrong, so if it works in that case, it can work in the general case. With a living rulebook, there are opportunities to complete the next action, which is to pick 3 unanswered questions and answer them definitively and publicly. A common trap is thinking that some problems are unsolvable because of the number of aspects to them, so nothing changes, when in fact solving part of the problem is better because it breaks the problem down. I think this is true of Smash Up questions, where the technical debt gets so large that it is never tackled, so it just grows larger, making it harder to solve in the future. For example, of the last 10 or so questions I've seen online at the time of recording, about half of them have come down to whether or not pre-triggering still applies as a Marvel. And if you don't know what pre-triggering is or was, don't worry, AEG seems to have forgotten it themselves. Some candidates I would throw out would be the Titan multiple clashing rule, pre-triggering, and of course During Gate. Alternatively, a crucial rule to explain publicly is whether ongoing before base scores counts as specials, because this seems to be a Jeremy-Bearimy type of fluctuation, majorly inconsistent in its usage. To close out the sub-theme of actions, completely redo the card resolution order. I have talked to countless people who don't understand how we went from an ordered list to a series of paragraphs, only to leave out key questions. Is it truly a stack or a queue? When do non-card reactions occur? When do ongoings apply? What the hell is going on with IfGate? The card resolution order is essential to making this game work consistently for everyone, and I almost wish that they had left it alone because it was better before. It's much harder to read now, especially with the split sections on specials, and what I find frustrating is that they waste space with fluff that is unnecessary. Don't print this first paragraph. Just print, "This is how cards resolve," and reclaim that space by going into more detail. I wonder if this is a byproduct of trying to make a complicated game system seem easier for an audience that can't exist the moment they buy into the main system. With steps missing and unclear questions as to what applies from the BCR, just start over and make a combined, complete card resolution order to make answering questions so much simpler. The next 2 action items are directed specifically at the fall 2023 release, as it is too late for the spring one. The first one is, whatever you do not introduce any new major mechanics. But you might say, Bandit, new mechanics are fun, why wouldn't you want them? It's a fair question, and I would counter with the fact that the rulebook is already unconsolidated, and this just makes consolidation harder. Also, we haven't fully integrated the mechanics we have. Every new mechanic feels like it's harder to revisit all mechanics, and it's just adding complexity and rules to a system that has reached critical mass. Just imagine the Cartesian product of every rule we have with a new mechanic, rules that aren't well defined. So why are we adding more? but I also believe that any mechanic introduced at this point would be overtly thematic and a one-off. On top of that, the recent track record is not good. If you look at the two major Oops mechanics, both got errata in the form of Titans, and those mechanics weren't done well in retrospect. Yet they still took the majority of a faction's design space, which leads into the second action item, which is to bring back a previous mechanic, but in a Hazza format. You may have heard me talk about Hazza versus Izza before. If you look at Warriors, they are an Izza monster faction. I think 18 out of their 20 cards mention monsters, whereas Mages are a Hazza monsters faction. They have monster cards, but aren't completely defined by it. This is my complaint about Skeletons. It's like they said, you want burying, here's 19 or 20 cards that use the word bury or uncover. If the mechanic is done well, it can be used in interesting ways in relative isolation, like how Innsmouth used Madness or the Real Mermaids used Madness. If you solve the 10th anniversary puzzle, you know that a new mechanic is coming next set, but it is currently done in a Hazza context, which is really good, and that should be a template for how to do so in the future. And please, do not overuse that mechanic, which is simple yet clever, and I swear I've seen it before. If monsters, treasures, and madness aren't capable of this, then this means that they were designed and organized wrong, and we should learn from it. Part of the reasons why I wanted mermaids to have madness was because it would reduce the coupling dependency on Cthulhu, but it is completely plausible that burying could come back for just one card, like how players wanted musketeers to have dueling. I think taking this approach would be something players would really like, because it keeps newer mechanics fresh and relevant without shoving as much as you can into one faction and oversaturating it. With Skeletons, because they need burying to work, they got tons of micro buffs to the point where they can be swingy, and it's a lot easier when your entire game plan isn't crammed into obscure mechanics. My final three actions are also thematically linked, and the first is to announce an It's Your Fault style contest, and do it soon. Start super early, and make it a goal to make it a top 3 quality expansion. At this point in the life cycle, quality needs to trump quantity by a significant margin. As players start to deal with saturation, space concerns, and increasing costs, the only way to combat these things is with quality and a direct through line to the community. I feel compelled to point out that there is a vocal minority who really wants clowns, so give them a chance to make it happen. I also think that this is the cure for a group who don't want IP factions, to give them an opportunity to state exactly what they do want. I get that these factions are harder to plan out since they are subject to the vote, so I'm saying to start super early to make sure it's of high quality. It would be extremely unfortunate for 2 out of 3 fan expansions to be anything but the best, regardless of what Judd Brown says. My penultimate action is one that I don't say lightly, and I need to make it clear that this is not coming just from me, and that is to acknowledge the Smash Up community more. This is a great community. According to Sonus, who at best can be described as an unreliable narrator, the Smash Up Reddit is among the top 10% of most active Reddits. It has a thriving Discord. It has multiple YouTube channels, Facebook group, worldwide clusters. And yet it feels like there is an iron curtain, often enforced with NDAs, and it's fair to ask, why? The goal of this video is not to dispute the value of NDAs in the board game industry, which are generally frowned upon, but to point out that it is yet another barrier to community engagement in an area that is generally lacking it lately. I remember being excited for the ritual that was the Wednesday Smash Up drops on Facebook to see what was coming. That cadence is long gone, and any updates are sporadic at best. In a dearth of content caused by COVID, there are other ways to keep the community engaged. Share what the community is doing. Share insight into the game's design or quirks. I've skimmed parts of the art book, and I know that there isn't much that is included there in terms of fun facts, so share more stories like that. Share roads not taken, memorable design moments, the thought process behind who gets a Titan, and more importantly, who didn't. There basically is no cadence or acknowledgement that there is a thriving community who mostly maintains itself by servicing itself, the very community that I would argue has brought in the most new players and kept the game going strong. And this leads up to my final point, which I will phrase in a blunt but ultimately loving way. If this is your flagship game, act like it. It's okay if it isn't. The game is 10 years old. Companies evolve and occasionally need to reprioritize their product line. Sometimes a team lets its face of the franchise walk away in free agency, and sometimes they do it again the very next year. Businesses require business decisions. But if you say that it is your flagship series, which you do, then act like it. There's a community who wants it to be. One of the things that struck me was how little the 10th anniversary, for all the milestone that it was actually promoted. Sure, I saw one ad, but the promotion was, buy this. What about bonus content? interviews, videos, something. If you're going to introduce a new game variant, have the staff play it, talk about its design. Why did you feel it was necessary? In fact, I cannot recall if I've ever seen anyone at the company play the game ever. Compare this to Tiny Towns, which during COVID got a daily game for months with guest spots. Granted, Tiny Towns is more accessible and capable of producing higher player counts, but this is not their flagship game. Smash Up is. But with Tiny Towns, the desire is there, the technology and the interaction are there, but the 10th anniversary of Smash Up got nothing. It wasn't even the first game that was promoted that day. This is a major milestone that is only celebrated through a purchase, and the attempts to secure that purchase were extremely small. It would have been a way to allow people who can't afford or obtain the actual box to still feel like they are celebrating something, like they are remembered. I would strongly encourage the powers that be to break the cycle of, there will be a new expansion, but we can't talk about it, and now it's out, so go buy it, with the community filling in the gaps. And I'd like to state, as a representative of said community, that we are happy to do our part, and I'm just suggesting that maybe we shouldn't be the only ones in terms of actually promoting this. If you're a member of the community who disagrees with my thoughts on the level of promotion, or if you saw something I missed, share it in the comments, because I genuinely want to be wrong here because it's better for the game system. Having been through multiple retrospectives in my job, I know that change doesn't come overnight and that it comes in steps, but I choose to believe that at least one of these 12 steps is an accomplishable first one. If some of these are hard to do alone, use the community. It's why we grow one. I'm always conscious of trying to avoid toxic fandom, which is why I'm organizing this around action items to make the experience better for everyone involved. Which of these action items would you like to see happen first? And is there anything I'm forgetting that you think is easily accomplishable that would make the game system better? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great Festivus, a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone, Happy New Year, and I'll see you all next year.